to Jupiter. Always exciting to get down here. Hello to everybody I haven't said hi to. Obviously I kind of feel like camp's two things to me. One is we finally have like a normal camp that we haven't had in a while, but yet we also have a bit of abnormalcy with the WBC. And so I just think as you're watching someone throw a bullpen today, it was one person instead of, all mounds going at once. Obviously I think when we get to Wednesday, you're going to see a little bit more normal feel to it. But I think most importantly, it's just nice to have some normalcy. And I think, as guys have been trickling in over the last week or so, good news for the St. Louis Cardinals is everybody looks like they're in really good shape. They've come prepared. And, just to touch on the WBC really quickly, as all of you could read or saw, we have a lot of players playing in it. So early on is going to be really critical to make sure that they're able to ramp up and be ready to contribute for their particular country or federation. And so, I think over the next couple of weeks will be very intriguing from that standpoint on pace. And then, of course, once we get into our own games, at the end of February, it's going to be fun because if you're a prospect hawk or like to see some of the younger players getting opportunities, there's going to be a lot of innings and at-bats to be had. So, 2023 camp is to me, feels very normal. There's certainly some abnormal things going on, but I think it's going to be exciting just to get it going.
This
time I would take some questions.
As a front office guy, do you have concerns about pitchers pitching in the WBC, or is there a positive they can take away from that as well?
I think like inherently there's always risk, right? But there's risks pitching in a spring training game. I think the biggest difference is really like adrenaline. When you think about someone's first outing in spring training or second outing, it's always about pace. They know they're just going to get their work, but when you're playing in a game that actually counts or matters, I think you just approach it differently. So we understand there's risk. What we're hoping for is that the group of pitchers that we have going understand and have prepared to ramp up to do so accordingly.
Mo, in that situation, are you in touch with the WBC officials as far as pitcher workload and things of that nature, or how's that work?
So for Team USA, D-Row and I have had some communication via phone and text. And again, we have to trust what they're doing, but most importantly, he wants to just make sure he's in contact with Ollie and Dusty on how our pitchers are going to be used. And he's been very transparent so far. And, now it's obviously you got to go play those games.
Well, you didn't have a lot of turnover, but this couple weeks before they take off, is it big for establishing culture, chemistry, that sort of thing?
It's awkward. I think like when you look at where our club is, that was part of sort of our off-season strategy, right? We knew we had to go get a catcher. We were able to accomplish that. But now it was about trying to create opportunity for some of these players or younger players to get their chance. And so when you look at all the things that could have been done this off-season, and we touched on this at winter warm-up, is clearly there were players out there in the free agent market or trade market that perhaps could have been incrementally better than what we had, but we didn't feel it was at what you were having to pay or give up. And so, ultimately I hope it's about young players taking this opportunity and running with it, right? And that's where it comes back to us, is that we believe in these guys and we trust them. So we'll see what happens over the next 7 weeks.
Well, how does camp work here with so many different tiers of players? Like Wilson is here, but not WBC. So can he participate with Wainwright? And
Yeah.
How
There's
work?
Basically anybody can come here voluntarily, right?
Okay.
The difference is as a organization, we can't say, hey, Wilson, you have to be here on the 13th.
Okay.
So as you're seeing players here, they are here all on their own, and Wilson's been down here for really 2 weeks. He's commuted back to Orlando a couple times, but for the most part, guys are wanting to be around here and wanting to get this going.
Well, granted, a lot of these things will shape themselves out over the spring, but when you're looking at position groups for this club, what do you think is going to be the most competitive?
Wow, I think a couple things really. I think when you look at our middle infield, I'm obviously Tommy Edman is going to be playing over for South Korea, so it's going to create some opportunities for other people to get those at bats. And then of course, how do we best use Brendan Donovan as we move forward? And then I would imagine Nolan Gorman is looking for a very competitive camp at second base. So I would note that as one area of competition. And I also would say like the outfield, right? Because clearly if we were to start today, we would probably just say Dylan, Newt, and Tyler, but it is going to be a competitive camp, and we have other players that are looking for those at bats, whether it's Yepez, Burleson, and not even to mention somebody like a Jordan Walker. So I think to your point, it's super early, right? It's not all these guys are even here yet, but I think that drives where the competition is, right? Obviously, we're pretty comfortable with our first and third baseman, right? And we're happy with our catchers, so there lies the competitive camp.
Well, what excites you the most about the opportunity to see Jordan in this environment this spring?
Well, I think the biggest difference is, you're going to see him in games, right? And in a competitive environment where he'll likely be listed in the starting lineup from a lot. And so, he's going to get a lot of exposure. So a lot of these younger guys that we read about and kind of dream about are going to be on display. And I think, again, from a fan standpoint, it's pretty exciting.
Can you talk about the way you've bolstered the left-handed pitcher? And you got a lot of competition left-handed pitcher and coming out of the bullpen. You added a couple guys lately. Can you just talk about that competition?
Well, I think like when you look at our overall roster, I think we'd all agree that we've tried to create just as much depth as possible. Now, when you look at guys like somebody like a Cabby, like if he's right, he's one of the more electric left-handed arms in the game. But what we wanted to do is just give ourselves as much protection as possible. We were trying to identify a few people with options just to give us some of that flexibility. But when you look at just overall stuff, between Cabby and JoJo, it's pretty exciting. And just the other day, I got to watch Packy throw a bullpen. Looked like his velocity had ticked up a little bit. Obviously, it's day one, lots of baseball to be played, but there was a lot of encouragement there.
Sort of related to everything you've already discussed, but from your perspective, heading into where we are right now, the beginning of spring training, what are the questions that you have about this ball club that you hope to see answered?
I think like when you sit in front of day one scrum, right? We always talk about like competition in camp, and I candidly, I'll admit sometimes there really isn't, right? Like we talk about it, but we kind of know what our club's going to look like. Whereas this year, I think it's pretty genuine. Performance and what people do is going to matter when you're looking at when we break at the end of March. What is our 26-man roster look like? And I could sit there and write a guess, right? But I would probably write down 32 names, and we know we got to break with 26. So I do think it's a pretty honest reflection of what this camp looks like when we use the word competitiveness and having competition for those roles. But I would also back up a minute and say like we have created some flexibility in that where players do have options and the ability to move back and forth.
So you have questions about it. Like fans are like, this guy's here, what is this guy? Can this guy reemerge? Can this guy emerge? You have the same question.
Absolutely.
Is this the most competitive camp you've been part of?
It's funny because like Ollie and I were reflecting on that yesterday, and we both we're trying to look in our own like sort of mental Rolodexes of what's happened over the years, and I would say definitely where we stand today feels like we're entering with certain questions on who's going to actually earn these spots. But in the meantime, I think that's just a healthy and fun thing to be a part of.
Well, how was the turnover in the coaching staff affected early going so far? Obviously, a lot of these guys were internal, but it's changed.
No, you're right, and it's. I probably should have brought that topic up when I opened. Really excited about our staff, though, and I'll just throw a compliment out to Ollie and the group that they've been very intentional ever since we had to make these changes, and obviously the bench coach was added, much later than one would have anticipated. But yet, Joe he's hit the ground running. He's drinking from a fire hose to sort of understand and learn how we do things. But I really appreciate his enthusiasm and his willingness to do that. And I think just from a pure staff standpoint, we met yesterday for the first time in person as a larger group, and I felt like the input and collaboration that we were getting from all sides was really impressive.
Well, is there something that you've already noticed that is maybe back in camp versus pre-pandemic times? I know last year maybe some of the social distancing and some of the COVID policies were dropped in camp, so you guys were able to gather and meet. But then it was the lockout, and that kind of rushed everything through. Is there something that's back here?
It just to me feels like a much more normal process, right? You know, no one's checking your temperature as you walk through. No one's, having to fill out any questionnaire like, do you have any symptoms? And by the way, I do have a little head cold, but I just think it's a head cold. But I woke up this morning. Oh my! Please don't make me I have to quarantine. But anyway, so I think like that part of the feel, and plus as you think about like camp preparations, like that just wasn't on the forefront of how we were planning out our day to day versus prior years. I remember reading through that multi-page document, making sure we're not missing something, we're not skipping something, and we're staying true to it.
And last year was just kind of all in mass arrival, right?
Last year was so different.
Logistics.
Yeah, and we understood we had a very, very short runway to get everything accomplished. And look, all 29 teams faced the same sort of issues we did, but it was hard to feel like that was normal.
Do you read much into early arrivals? I know a lot of it's related to the WBC, but you've had some guys who are...
Not really, because this if you think about the last 20 years of the St. Louis Cardinals, it's looked like this all the time, right? We have veteran players that understand what they need to do. Our best players tend to care the most, and they lead by example, and they're usually the first ones here. And so, you look at the 2023 Cardinals, it's no different. It's been very impressive, the group that's already assembled, and certainly excited on the guys that are here.
Do you think that's a small, not small, do you think that's a subtle thing that benefits y'all that Adam didn't walk off into the sunset with Yachty and Albert last year, that him it's one more year, kind of continuing that group one more year with him?
I mean, anytime you have those types of players around other players, you're going to benefit. So whether we define it as small or large, it's impactful.
Yeah, I just want
right? And so I think that you think back over the 25 years of the St. Louis Cardinals, we've always been fortunate enough to have those types of players as leaders, and that's not by a mistake. I mean, that's intentional. And so having those kind of players here, absolutely. So that next generation is going to get more exposure to Adam, and that's great.
John, do you get a sense that Tyler and Dylan show up to camp knowing that they're fighting for a job? That Ollie said he hopes that every day when they wake up that they're thinking, I got to keep my job, that there's a competition every day for spots in the outfield?
Again, I think we touched on this earlier about talking about competition. I think everybody is going to have to embrace that phrase, with the exception of a few people. But when I say the exception of a few people, they're like the most competitive guys on earth, right? They're competing every day, and so you don't want a mindset where you have to come in here with fear or being nervous, but you certainly want people to understand that the next 7 weeks are going to be important. And it's not necessarily going to say like strictly your performance over the next 7 days or 7 weeks is going to make or break how we think of you, because that is a small sample size. Opportunity is different from time to time, but I definitely think how guys go out, and we've got to caveat this as the WBC is going on, and one of those individuals you just mentioned will be playing for a team, and so balancing what we see and what we can't see and trying to follow how they play in competition is going to matter.
Hey Mo, with Contreras, did you see him yet today?
I did.
Well, what was that like? Just he's here. He's actually in your camp. It's actually happening. Wilson Contreras is your catcher.
Well, I was thrilled to see him. Look, when you go out in the free agent market and you sign a player, probably one of the greatest compliments you can have to your organization is someone that truly wants to be here. And that has resonated since the day we agreed on terms. Now, to see him in the clubhouse and actually, be able to shake his hand and give him a hug, that's cool. And look, he's enthusiastic. We know he's a high energy player, and I think from an organizational standpoint, he's going to be one of those individuals that helps others grow as well.
And for you, you've been with the organization for Wainwright's entire run.
Yeah.
You were younger. He was younger. We're here. He's in his last year. Can you just describe?
Older.
Deep thoughts, I know.
Yeah.
Can you just describe? I mean, here he is, his last year. You've grown with him, and you've been with him, and here he is.
It's sort of like the question of like reflecting on one's career, and specifically his. I mean, I think we'd all agree it's going to be defined by greatness. It's going to be defined by large amounts of success. There were periods where he lost time because of injuries, but in the end, his importance to the St. Louis Cardinals is one day he'll wear that red jacket, right? And just when you think about all the players that have kind of come through the system, I mean, he's just so unique because he's such a special player in the sense of just genuinely kind human being, and that makes it awesome. And so I think I don't really want to reflect on every time he takes the ball or anything like that this year. I think at some point you'll sit back and look back at what he did and what he meant to this organization. And I imagine we're all going to agree it was beyond impactful.
Because that's the other part of it. You need him to be pretty good this year.
That would help. Yeah.
What did you need to hear from him before re-signing him after the way the season ended last year?
Well, I mean, some of what we discussed, I think I'll keep confidential, but look, he's not a guy you want to bet against.
Okay.
Because if so, you're probably going to lose.
I mean, I just assume when you put pen to paper on that offer, you are pretty confident.
You got to be thoughtful on that. We were, but yeah, we're going into this with confidence.